We're going to hear from some amazing leaders in South Florida's real estate economy who are working on building new projects and on a lot of the new innovations in this space. So please welcome to the stage Avra Jain, founder of the Vagabond Group, Nitin Motwani, managing principal of Miami World Center Associates, and Melissa Krinzman, managing partner at Krinzman Ventures. Take it away.
Can everyone hear me? Good morning. So we are happy to be here with the Real Estate Innovators panel. I will just preface this by saying that 2017 for venture capital was the emergence of a lot of funds that were focused on real estate tech, also known as prop tech. All of a sudden we saw a whole bunch of funds come out of the woodwork investing in real estate. So there's good reason for it. And I'm going to give a quick background on Nitin and Avra, but if you Google either of them, there are a ton of articles, and I encourage you to go do that and read all about their great work. So Nitin is developing the $2 billion, 27-acre Miami World Center, and it's the biggest the second biggest mixed-use project in the United States after Manhattan's Hudson Yards. And Avra is known for restoring and transforming neighborhoods. You've heard of Mimo, Little River, and now Overtown. Her projects have her investments have all been absolutely restoring those neighborhoods and making them what they are today. So what I'd like to do is just talk about neighborhood transformation and what you're doing by way of using technologies to do things faster, smarter, and better, and how you're saving time and money in the process. So Nitin, I thought I'd start with you. And in my research, I read an article about you that said that what's keeping you up at night is about what else you can be doing to improve the area. And that you started in 2006 when there was no Uber or autonomous cars. So what I'm curious about is, as the project has developed, how have you been adding new technology that's popping up that didn't exist when you first conceived the project?
Sure, so part of it in our world is sticks and bricks is that it's technology, but it's also the space, the physical space, because what Avra does such a great job is of adaptive reuse. Well, if we can build these buildings, building in flexibility, because the adaptive reuse happens a lot faster. So, Uber and Lyft being a great sponsor for this conference, so make sure we say that, weren't around either, right? So our big valet drop-offs that we had centralized, which we still have, now also serve as, more importantly, the drop-off and pickup spots for ride sharing. Our parking garages, as an example, were parking garages. Now they're far more efficient because they can be dynamic, meaning there's technology with like Google Sidewalk where you put in an address and it takes you to a parking garage versus the western part of our project, which on a 28-acre project could take you an extra 15 minutes. Then there's a physical space. Creative office space, co-working, didn't exist. So the office building we're doing with Hines is a lot more flexible. The hotels, Airbnb didn't exist. So we're talking about serviced apartments, vacation rentals to compare with that. Apartments, it's all about having some sense of co-working space and more public spaces because a lot more people are working at home because of technology. So some of it's the technology itself and some of it is the physical space that we're actually building and designing so that can adapt as the world adapts.
That's great. So Avra, Nitin just mentioned co-working and co-living. I think of you as the first person who introduced that into your neighborhoods. Can you tell us a little bit about the development projects where you've introduced that and how and why?
Yeah, so I think we've been very fortunate with our group that a lot of the people that are doing innovative things actually come to us as developers and telling us what they need and want. So, for instance, at the Miami River Inn, which is actually the oldest hotel in Miami, we have a co-living concept there called Roam. We were there first in the US. It's kind of a nomadic, tech-driven community, and they have places now all over the world. So people come and they rent for 1 month at a time. They've given up their apartments. It's about community. It's about access to internet. These are people that could freelance and be anywhere, and they're choosing lifestyle as opposed to a permanent home base. in addition to them, we also are the landlord to another company called Saunders, which is really organized Airbnb, which is what you were sort of referring to. So this idea that, it's another form of hospitality. So in the end, as developers, or at least with our group, our job is to listen. And we are not always innovative maybe in how we run our businesses. I think actually the real estate industry is one of the most inefficient businesses out there. And finally, I think tech is coming to real estate in a big way. I think some catching up to do. But we're innovative in how we, in the companies we attract. And one of the things that we're starting to do too is we're starting to actually not just invest in the space, but sometimes even invest in the people that are coming. And in Miami in particular, Miami's become a platform for a lot of startups. So sometimes we are the incubator space for these companies. And I know Nitin's been a part of that also.
So to Avra's point, when I started in venture back in '98, the sponsors of conferences like this were the law firms and the accounting firms. And as I sit here, I'm staring at Engel and Volkers, which never would have been a sponsor of an innovation oriented conference when I started in '98. So I think it underscores what you just said, that there's so much new innovation in real estate that all aspects of real estate are getting involved now, from brokerages to developers. So in terms of a lot of the deal flow that I've seen recently, I've seen something called the retail apocalypse, meaning that it's being disrupted completely, and we're seeing how retail is going to look and feel in the future. From department store deconstruction, moving towards experiential stores, to advances in retail tech such as interactive displays and connectivity that responds to individual preferences. So I'm curious, as you've curated your communities, how have you looked at the innovation in retail and making selections about who you invite into your communities, and or questions you may be asking them about how they're going to continue to attract folks to your communities?
Yeah, so I think, and of course Nitin's got a big challenge ahead of himself, but I think part of what we try to do when we do new neighborhoods is we are looking for placemakers. So lots of time what drives us and who we're talking to is, it has a lot to do with who they are and what they're doing and how that impacts the sort of the ecosystem of the rest of the development. And you've got a very large ecosystem coming. But what I've learned recently in retail is actually came from a friend of mine, Jamestown, who just sold their big building, Googled Chelsea Market, that bricks and mortars do matter. And so this idea that retail is like gone, I mean, is not really what we're seeing.
A bit exaggerated?
Yeah, a little exaggerated, right. I think, so the bricks and mortars, and people are looking to put their bricks and mortars geographically where people shop online. So even though the sales may not be in the stores, they are now able to monitor and actually get data on who's shopping, who's going online to shop. And so that the retailers understand that they do need the bricks and mortar, and that people still, they have better sales online after they can see it, feel it, touch it.
Yeah, and I'd say for us, I mean, it was a perfect example because we lived it. We had a Bloomingdale's Macy's anchored mall. We were selling it financially. It would have been great if we sold it and that mall was coming up. For Miami World Center in our city, it wouldn't have been great. And so we pivoted with our partners, Forbes and Taubman, got rid of Bloomingdale's and Macy's, and now we have an open-air, street-level, high-street retail. But imagine, like everything, real estate is very micro. You can read about the retail apocalypse. I can tell you that any retail space in this community, if the price is right, will get leased because there's people here. So imagine you have land that sits in the middle of the Performing Arts Center, the Museum of Art, Museum of Science, 5 million cruise passengers, the American Airlines Arena where the Heat play, a new $3 billion train station bringing 12 million people to your front door. You're building 5,000 residential units, and you've got 2,000 hotel rooms planned, including the largest conference hotel in the state. Well, there's going to be a demand for everything, retail, restaurants, entertainment, and that's what we have. And so for us, it's actually been great because we're now able to curate the retail versus letting the retail curate us, which is what would have happened had we built a mall. And so to Avra's point, the retailers are far more sophisticated. They've had to tighten their belts, revisit their models, or die. just like everybody else, they've had to change. And so what we're actually seeing is those that have embraced the change are doing very well. And bricks and mortar is important. And markets like Miami are important to them, not just for the local 6 million population in the Tri-County or the 14.5 million overnight visitors, but we're the capital of Latin America. I mean, this conference shows it, right? So that also explains why all of the malls, all of the retail centers in Miami are still doing phenomenal. We have 4 centers doing over $1,000 a foot. That's incredible.
And it's important to their brand. Like especially if you're a new company, and Miami's a great place to do that. I mean, lots of times retailers are choosing to be somewhere as part of their brand building.
It's a great point. Part of the biggest change that they liked about our project was they could have the brand identity they wanted. And all they cared about were the public spaces. How can I extend myself out into the public realm, which we are programming. We'll have 6 acres of public space that we own, that we curate, that we manage. So they know it'll be Class A, perfectly pristine, safe, etc.
So let's talk about AR, VR, augmented reality and virtual reality. Have you put that into the planning and execution of your development projects yet, or is that still too far out there that you haven't incorporated it?
So ironically, we would have thought this worked best for condos. It hasn't. We've done it, but the sales center, the vision, the videos, that it's still a lot of that. Where we have found it helpful are actually with equity partners, with lenders, with retailers, with some of our partners. I mean, I have a great picture with Gerald Hines, 92 years old, who's our partner in the office, doing this VR tour as the architects presented to us in their design charrette. That type of stuff is great, and we built actually a platform sitting 16 feet high at the crossroads of our 2 major pedestrian walkways, and I can take someone up there, put on VR goggles, and they can experience these 2 very different spaces with a beautiful public park, how the retail facade could look, and it's been phenomenally helpful and also relatively inexpensive. I already did all the renderings, so it didn't cost me anything. But where it's been really helpful is with our equity partners and our lenders, because as we were talking about before this, a lot of times we as developers want to do something different. We want to push the envelope. And the larger the scale, the harder it is, because once I'm on board, I have to then convince my equity partner. I then have to convince my lender. And that's an educational process that oftentimes we don't have time to do. So by presenting them VR, a lot of times they're able to better envision what you're trying to articulate, and that can save a lot of time. So we have embraced it, but ironically not in the areas where I would have expected.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting. Real estate as an industry is typically a business that looks back, not forward. So when you're dealing with lenders and banks, it's always, well, where did it sell yesterday? Who was there yesterday? It's based on comps and statistics, looking back, not forward. In fact, we rely a lot on our tenants to be the placemaking and the forward thinking. So I think some of that changes. I'm fortunate, which is probably why I don't play in the big boy space, is that we're able to be a little bit more flexible, a little more out of the box, but it is hard to get people on board sometimes. And so I'm fortunate to have people that sort of trust enough to sometimes take that leap, because everybody still wants to know, wants a spreadsheet to work, right? Never show me a spreadsheet, because that you can manipulate a spreadsheet, right? I can take any cell and have it tell me what I want it to tell me, and so it's great for sensitivity analysis and looking forward. But I can tell you, every project that starts, especially a large scale project, it ends up different. And where you
That's the only fact.
That's the
it
only
will be
thing.
different.
It will be different, and so and different's good, and it's usually for good reason. So I think that as an industry, we're learning, and I think as there are more innovative projects that are successful, we'll hopefully break some new boundaries. But it is something where people, the beauty of the visual stuff is people still in real estate can't imagine volume and space sometimes. So having those tools, I think, is going to be really important, especially when you're talking large scale projects. Yeah.
So, given that you're both developers in South Florida, I'm curious if you've turned to any sea level rise types of technology in terms of looking at your properties. Is there anything out there that you've been turning to? Has it been more old school? Are you seeing opportunities in that space that will help you to plan and build better? Just curious.
You know, I don't know. People go, Avra, do you look at the maps? Are you looking at this? And I have to tell you,
No?
I don't. I don't. And I can tell you, and think about it. Think of all the projects that are getting built on the ocean. And people say, oh, the developers were displacing communities, we're going to higher ground and pushing people to lower ground. I'm like, really? I go, we're really not that maybe as smart as we should be, right? So, and you know, most of the sexy big projects are right on the ocean and right on waterfront. I mean, we are in Miami because of the water. So we just have to learn better how to embrace it. As it turns out, I buy a lot of existing warehouse, and I do a lot of adaptive reuse. Even on Biscayne Boulevard with the Vagabond Motel. Well, just so happens the Vagabond Motel was on US 1. We are 15 feet before I hit water there. 15 feet. And somebody said to me, Avra, did you plan that? I said, no, I didn't plan that. I said, but it just so happens that they probably built the highway on the right piece of dirt, right? And the motel was right next to that right piece of dirt. Same thing with the railroad tracks. I buy near railroad tracks. Well, railroad tracks were built on the right piece of dirt. So I'm not seeing developers, digging deep into this. I think we are definitely concerned about resiliency. I think Miami's done a good job as one of the 100 resilient cities, and so it's absolutely something we're talking about and addressing, but it is not driving our decision making as much as people think.
Our land sits between Biscayne Boulevard and the train station, so we're 12 to 16 feet above sea level. We actually did think about it back then, but not for 10 years later because no one cared until this last summer when the images of Harvey or Brickell were everywhere, and we said, yeah, we're 12 to 16 feet above the water table. We just redid all the infrastructures. We spent $100 million to improve water, sewage, stormwater drainage, etc. So we are doing that. And then there's things in our design. I mean, we have a 4-acre amenity deck. We have no concrete roofs. Everything's a park, a public space, amenity. So we have tried our best to incorporate the design, but technology ironically hasn't really helped much there.
So another big category is big data. Have you incorporated AI, artificial intelligence, into any of your real estate decisions? Broad question, but I'm just curious if you're looking at that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just starting. I think there's a lot of room for more of it. So we're using big data. So there's two companies that I use, Critics, and I'm also involved with Deep Blocks. And both of them, one of them is big data. So the thing about real estate is a lot of it is public information. The zoning rules, the uses, even when you think back about the comps and the streets and what's happening with FDOT and all these things. So part of it was, instead of having to dig it all up yourself, now people are starting to pull that stuff together. And I think another big opportunity, which is something that Gritix is doing, is that a lot of the municipalities actually need help. They need help in terms of urban planning, in terms of making themselves available, in terms of answering questions with developers and home buyers. And they don't have the IT departments and aren't funding the IT departments to do these things. So what's happening now is I think there's an opportunity, and I think Gritix is doing a good job of that, where they're basically becoming the IT departments for all these municipalities. Yeah. So there's a lot of efficiency to be gained there, and I think we're going to see a lot more of it in the future.
So, there's always that balance of big data, as we've seen with Zuckerberg's presentation to Congress. I look at it and think what an opportunity it is, because if you think about the resident of any downtown, so take, a resident of our condo, Paramount Miami World Center, part of the issue in living downtown is also the reason you live in downtown. You can go to the museums, you can go to an American Airlines arena event, you can go to all types of things. But the problem is when you're on your way to a meeting and you're late because there's traffic, or you're coming home exhausted and you're late because of traffic, those types of inconveniences can be solved through big data. So for example, my calendar reads I need to be at Emerge at 9 a.m. It can tell me leave at 8:17, press the elevator button, let's Panther Coffee know I want my usual coffee. By the time I get down to the elevator, The valet knows I'm actually coming. It's not that I called and said I'm coming. I'm actually going to be there. So they get my car. I pick up my coffee. I'm in the car. I know that there's an event going on at the Performing Arts Center, so I'm leaving 7 minutes early. It maps my route to get here, and then the same on the way back. It reminds me that there's a Heat playoff game, so I should leave a little early. So I think there's a lot of ways it can get very interesting. I can use that same story for a visitor at our hotel, an office tenant, etc., or just somebody taking the train who's coming to our project. And so I think there's a huge opportunity to make all of our lives easier. Then you incorporate the retail. It reminds me it's Avra's birthday coming up. I need to get her something. She likes this. So it
Tell them what you
but
want.
then that's I already know what she likes, so it's okay. But I think that's the great opportunity. The concern is Big Brother knows everything, and how much do we want them to know? So I think this trade-off will continue to evolve. But we're spending a lot of time in California and elsewhere, Seattle on the West Coast, trying to better understand with these companies how we can work together to make it a better experience. Because a lot of our daily frustrations have to do with traffic or logistics or every 5 minutes being booked in our schedules. And if big data can help us as we build a city, make our residents or office tenants or hotel guests have a better experience, that adds a lot of value to us as well as to those consumers.
I wish we had more time because I would like to dig into even what's happening in the apartments and the buildings and the homes and the offices, because there's so much happening there that we're seeing on a daily basis. But given we have about 5 minutes left, I'd love for you to share with the audience some of the actual personal investments that you're making in technology companies, as we are, to help the category grow. So maybe you can do a commercial for a couple of the, maybe if you don't even want to say the names, that's fine. But if you do, share what those companies are doing, what categories they're in.
Yeah, so and Miami's got a couple of homegrown companies, which is
which is great. And we have some co-investments.
Yeah, so 305. So I talked about GridX earlier. GridX is really it's a zoning technique and software system, such that, let's just say you were looking at a particular piece of land. You could go on your computer, press that piece of land, and instantaneously you would find out what you could build, how much volume, what are the uses, and even give you a three-dimensional image of what that is. So what it does is it doesn't necessarily help you. It doesn't make decisions. It's not making decisions for me.
It's time savings.
Yeah, for how I'm going to invest. But what it does do is it eliminates. So if I'm looking at 10 different things, it allows me to focus on the 3 things that I know I can at least do what I want to do. Because remember, in real estate, we work with a bunch of rules and regulations. So knowing those rules and regulations, that's something I spent a lot of time getting good at. It's like a sport, right? You got to know how to play, right? And what's the name of the game. So these tools are very helpful. It actually levels the playing field a little, marginalizes me probably a little bit, so I like to own what's marginalized.
You own a piece of it.
And then the other company I'm involved in, which is a little bit later, is Deep Blocks. Deep Blocks is actually artificial intelligence. And one of the things that I asked of some of the people that I had met with, and they said, Avra, what do you need? What are the tools you need? And Deep Blocks actually takes it one step further, because not only do they do the zoning analysis and everything, they actually give me an analytical report. I'm able to move the slider. What is it going to cost me to build? So I instantaneously can get a snapshot, sort of a back of the envelope of what this project can do and what I hope to make in terms of returns. Again, helping me, saves me a lot of time, but also saves me a lot of money. I'm not having to hire an architect. I'm not having to hire an analyst. I'm not hiring to have a land use attorney. Because remember, all these things, this is all information that's readily available.
And it's a visual display that you can manipulate.
And you can manipulate, so that now I have my analyst, I have my architect, and all my land use attorney all at the press of a button. Again, it's not making final decisions for me, but it's saving a lot of time and a lot of money.
That's great. Nitin?
Fortunately, I'm also an investor in GridX with Avra, so I think that, to her point, she articulated great for the developers, great as much so, if not more, for the municipalities that are often overworked and understaffed. Also, Stay a While, which is started off trying to take unused inventory of hotels and is now pivoted, and it's trying to create an extended stay concept around the world for people who travel a lot, live on the road, but give them a more friendly or user-friendly experience that they're expecting. Also locally, Boat Setter, ride sharing for boating. I think 90% of the time boats sit idle, so it's a great way to share your boat. And then Boat Yard, which services boats for you. So with your app, you can refuel your boat, get it cleaned, etc. So I mean, those are some examples. I think your point earlier about prop tech, the numbers I read in 2015, it was virtually zero. Probably Avra, myself, and 10 other people here. Last year was $4 billion. And so the stuff that I'm seeing now being presented is incredibly well thought out. It's very well backed. I think that's great for real estate because that's what we need. And as Avra and I were saying earlier, one of our big challenges, again, is getting our equity and debt comfortable. What we're starting to see are a lot of these billionaires, companies, if not the individual, the company, saying they want to do things different. So they want to build or design something the way they do. They don't really care about the Excel spreadsheet the way that we have to. That will help because that'll start to change the way people think about it. And you've seen that frustration from some of these big companies that try to interact with municipalities. They want to move 1,000 miles an hour and the municipality stop them for zoning, stop them for land use, stop them for environmental, stop them for legal, all of the other fun stuff we're used to. So I think this only increases.
I would just say one fun fact about prop tech is that it has not emerged out of Silicon Valley. It's been New York, Chicago, Boston, and now Miami that we're seeing a lot of activity because that's where all the real estate developers are, DC too. So the deals that we've invested in are co-investors with companies with funds out of those cities. And we're seeing more and more. And I agree, it didn't exist prior to, really, last year was its emergence, but it just didn't exist. So we are at zero. Thank you so much for your attention. We could have gone on for hours. We appreciate you being here. Enjoy the conference.